Grandis Nar van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the history of Magic the Gathering, where I go set by set, release by release, going over all the various products and bits that have been released by Wizards of the Coast that have, well, Magic cards to them. Talking about the cards, the mechanics, the various history and world settings that are established throughout these sets to give Magic its existence. So today I have you a new block within Magic the Gathering. The Alara block, and of course the first set within it, Shards of Alara. So Shards of Alara was released on October 3rd of 2008. It had 249 cards. This was the first thing that we see a change in the way that Wizards did things. Always before now, when they came to the first set in a new block, they would always aim for above 300 cards. They were scaling back the number of cards in this first set in the blocks to balance things out a little bit and to scale back the number of cards they were producing. So it had a couple of themes, of course. It had the themes of 3 colored mana, of colored artifacts, and of large creatures. The keywords it had were Cycle, and then the keywords of Devour, Exalted, and Unearth. The set symbol itself was made to represent the 5 Shards of Alara, the 5 different sort of pseudo-planes, all once having been one. So this set saw a number of changes in amongst the packaging and the way that sets were shown. First off, we had the introduction of a new rarity, mythic rares. Mythic rares that every so often, in amongst packaging, a rare would be replaced by a mythic rare. Now, this doesn't mean you would get a mythic rare every package. No. Depending on the set itself, there was a level of how many boosters you effectively had to get on average to pick up a mythic rare. It was effectively a level of rarity above what we already had to sort of separate out some more powerful cards from ones that are just generalized rares. We also saw that a card in amongst the booster packs was replaced with a basic land permanently. This is something that had been shown in core sets, but now we are seeing this within expansions being a standardized thing, that now every pack will have a basic land to it. We saw the return of Planeswalkers in this set, and we also saw the introduction of multicolored Planeswalkers, so no longer were the Planeswalkers just a single color. Now, when it came to bringing us the Shards of Alara, the design team itself actually was split up. There were a separate design team for each of the shards, developing them separately, giving them very unique and interesting flavors. The point of this was to do just that, to give every shard their own unique flavor, their own unique world setting that still connects together to a degree, but there's such differences between them that make them unique and interesting. We also saw a new type of tournament introduced as part of the block itself, a theme tournament. Now, this took a form very similar to the pre-release tournaments, that it was a sealed deck where you would get a number of packs, open them up, build a deck, play with it. But in this case, there was another extra rules. For the Alara block here, the introduction to it, you would have to choose one of the shards that you would represent. Each of the shards, of course, had 3 mana to it, so you built a deck using 3 mana. You could only use cards of that mana. You were disallowed for using cards of other mana. And you would not be unable to produce mana of any of those other colors. Should something you have in the deck itself have the ability to somehow produce mana of those other colors, instead that was colorless mana. That it turned out that way. Now, I did mention that we did have colored artifacts once again in this set, and it was a major theme. The thing about this is you put them in the set uniquely because of the collector's number, because there was such a great deal of them. Rather than putting them in with the normal sections of artifacts within the collector's numbers, they actually integrated them into the individual colors. So, for example, if you had a blue artifact, it would be in with the blue cards. When they had multicolored artifacts, it's in with the multicolored cards. And, of course, your normal, generic, colorless artifacts are in the normal section that they would be near lands. The story of Alara has it as a single plane at one time, a very mana-rich plane. But a powerful planeswalker wished to harvest that mana, and doing so, though, caused a great calamity across it, drawing much of the power from the plane itself. This caused it to shatter into 5 shards. These shards managed to survive this, each of them having a core of one of the colors of mana, and began to recover. But when they recovered, they only recovered a slight bit, only a portion of it. So they recovered the allied colors to each of their side. So the white shard recovered blue and green, and so on and so forth for all the other 5 shards, as they became their own unique landscapes. Their ecology and cultural heritages developed separately under the influence of these 3 manas into the unique things that they are today. Now, released with this was Planar Explorer, a special flash object game that allowed you to explore the planes itself. Now, as for the marketing, what it was sold in 16-card booster packs, a 75-card tournament deck, 5 intro packs, and a fat pack. Now, this was the last set to have a tournament pack. After here, the tournament packs were completely removed. The intro pack itself was something that was replacing both the pre-constructed decks of before and 2-player starters. So they sort of combined the pre-constructed 2-player starters into these intro packs. We also saw a change in the fat packs as they removed the novels that once had been part of it, and now included material that was similar to little excerpts of information that would be from them, or excerpts of information from Planeswalker guides. The Pro Tour cards, which had existed in products other than booster packs up until now, were discontinued. No longer would we see Pro Tour cards. Now, this was accompanied by a novel, but the novel itself was for the entire block. Alara Unbroken, the entire block that's represented. And there was a Planeswalker's Guide to Alara that was released on the side here with some information, art, and such about the set. Now, the pre-release was on September 27th and 28th of 2008, and the pre-release card was an Ajani Vengeant with alternate art. Of course, showing off both Return of Planeswalkers and multicolored Planeswalkers all in one foul swoop. Now, the boosters were, of course, reformatted during this time. They would have a single basic land, 10 commons, 3 uncommons, and 1 rare/mythic rare. There would also, of course, be a rules/token/marketing card that would be accompanying in these packs. Now, if there was a foil in one of these packs, it would replace one of the commons. So, regardless of rarity of the foil itself, one of the commons would be less, so it would have 9 commons and a foil instead. Now, there were 5 different booster packs with each of them representing basically something from one of the shards. So each of them had a different kind of color profile to them. Now, there was a special all-foil booster pack that was released on January 8th of 2010. This had foils from the entire Alara block in it that you could just get foils. Now, the 16th card took the form of either a flavor/shard card describing one of the various shards and some information of it. So, of course, there was 5 of those. Or of 10 different tokens, which you could, of course, represent the various tokens that cards within the set could create. On the other side of either of these was a combination of 6 ads, which existed, basically advertising more things based upon Magic the Gathering. More Pro Tour information like that, expanded Magic play. Now, though the set had a very distinct multicolor feel to it, there was this kind of separation between all the cards based upon the shard that they were representing. Each shard had its own themes to it that matched it. So Bant, of course, was a shard with primarily white mana, and of course the secondary of green and blue. And it had the ability of Exalted that it introduced, which is whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This meant the more exalted things you had, the bigger your things would get when they attacked alone. There was Esper, which the theme of it was, of course, the colored artifacts we talked about. Esper was blue with secondary colors of white and black. Grixis was primarily black, but it also had red and blue. Now, Grixis gave the ability of Unearth. Unearth was a cost that you could play, and then you would unearth a creature from your graveyard. You return a creature you control from your graveyard to the battlefield. It would gain haste at the beginning of the next end step, or should it leave the battlefield, it gets exiled. So both of these occur. If it leaves battlefield, exiled. At the beginning of the next end step, exiled. Regardless, you can use Unearthed as a sorcery. Jund was primarily a red shard that, of course, had green and black. Now, Jund itself gave the ability Devour, which was represented by Devour N. When a creature with Devour would enter the battlefield, you could sacrifice N creatures. The creature with Devour would then get N times the number of creatures you sacrificed +1/+1 counters on it. So if I Devour 1, I sacrificed 1 creature, I only get 1/+1/+1 counter. If I Devour 2 creatures, 4/+1/+1 counters. You multiplied those numbers together to see how many +1/+1 counters this thing got. Naya was the final one, which of course was primarily green, with some red and white, which their entire theme was creatures with a power of 5 or greater. Now, also we did see in this set a return of cycling. So this was another set that had cycling again. Now this set had 19 cycles to it. 9 of them were based directly around creatures. They had the common 1-drop creatures. They were a cycle of creatures that of course cost you 1 mana. They were common. The allied color 2-drop creatures. They basically cost you a combination of 2 allied colors to drop them out. Also common. The battle mages were of course creatures that represented each of the shards, with activated abilities based upon the 2 allied colors within that shard. So the green one would of course have red and white. There were then tricolors. There was the common tricolored creatures. It was basically a common creature that cost you 3 different mana, basically representing one of the shards. The uncommon tricolored creatures, same thing, is representing one of the shards, 3 colors. This one's uncommon. There were the mythic legends. These were powerful legends in the set that were, of course, mythic rares. They would cost you the 3 mana of the shard that they were said to come from, to cast them. The heralds were special creatures that you could spend 2 mana, and then the mana that they cost to put out. Then you would have to sacrifice 3 creatures. 1 of the creature's color that you have in play, and 1 of each of the allied colors of that one. For a good example, the green creature, if you activated its herald, you'd have to sacrifice a green creature, you'd have to sacrifice a red creature, and sacrifice a white creature, and you'd have to tap a green and 2 colorless to activate this ability. Then you'd search your library for a noble creature and put it into play. Now let's talk about the cycle that goes with this, the noble creatures. These again are very powerful legends, each which have you 3 mana cost, so very similar to the mythic legends, except they are being heralded in. So that is the only difference between them. They have the heralds, which linked it in. But effectively, they are a secondary rare from each of the shards. Finally, there is the cycle, which is technically 2 cycles, the allied color activated mana creatures. So these are creatures that have, as I'm showing one of each of them here, that you can have an activated cost of an allied color mana. That's why there's 2 cycles of them. There's one that looks to the allied color to the clockwise on the magic symbol. So you look clockwise and head around them, so 1 cycle of those, and then one that goes counterclockwise and a cycle of those. So you have 2 of every color that go one way and the other way for allied color activated abilities. So the remaining cycles, of course, were panoramas. Panoramas you could tap for a colorless mana. These, of course, were common triple lands. And why were they triple lands? Because you could also sacrifice them to search for one of the 3 basic lands represented by the shard the panorama is from. So, example, if it's Naya, you could search for a mountain, forest, or plains. There were also the shard lands. These were uncommon triple colored lands that came into play tapped, but you could tap it for 1 of 3 mana that would represent the shard it's from. The obelisks were common artifacts that would tap for 1 of 3 mana representing the shard the obelisk was linked to. The common allied colored spells had 2 effects. There were also the resounding spells. These were common instants or sorceries that you could play them for an effect, or you could cycle them for 5 colorless mana and 3 colored mana representing 1 of the shard's colored mana, and have double the normal effect. So you could either just play it or cycle it for a huge effect for a huge cost. There were the charms, cost you 3 mana, representing, of course, another time, 1 of the shards, but these were module spells that would have 3 effects you could choose from. The uncommon allied color spells were just that. They were uncommon, had allied color, but you would need 2 of one of the allied colors of one of the shards in order to cast it. There were the uncommon enemy-colored spells, which of course needed 2 of an enemy-colored mana in order to cast it. The ultimatums were a very powerful spell that would cost you 2 mana of each of the colors of the shard that they were representing for a very big effect. There were the rare tricolor spells that would cost you 3 mana, of course, of the different colors of the shard, and they were rare. Now, there were also 5 sort of mini cycles here. Each of these cycles was actually intrinsically linked to one of the shards, and since that shard did not have the other 2 mana, hence why these are each a mini shard, a mini cycle. There were the Esper Capsules. These 3 artifacts you could tap to basically, you could use them with some mana, sacrifice them for an effect based upon the color that they were. There were the Jund Scavengers. These were uncommon creatures that, of each of the 3 colors of Jund, that when another creature would go into the graveyard from play, they would get a +1/+1 counter. More stuff dies, the bigger they get. There are the Naya Cycle creatures, large creatures that you were from Naya, you could of course cycle. The Naya Druids, these were 2/2 human druids that at the end of your turn, if you controlled a creature of power 5 or greater, you'd have some effect, and they could tap for a colorless. And there was the Naya Soul Spells. Each of these instants or sorceries would have an effect based upon the power of a creature it was targeting. Now there were 2 mirror pairs, including Marble Chalice and Onyx Goblet. One allowed you to gain life, the other caused an opponent to lose life. There were 6 reprints, including Naturalize. 3 functional reprints, including Cillian Elves for Grizzly Bears, and a couple of other cards, which Grizzly Bears were also had a bunch of functional reprints for, but another one. There were 3 color-shifted cards, including Angel Song for LOL. There were 2 misprints in this entire set. Mighty Emergence and Manaplasm switch their collector's number. There's a misprint that exists throughout the set. Now, the intro packs themselves were each 3 colors, each of them, of course, based upon one of the shards. They included a pre-constructed 41 card deck that included 1 foil rare and 1 non-foil rare, a booster pack of Shards of Alara, and a little card giving you some tips and tricks about playing and using this very deck that is in here. So a little insert about using the deck and the mechanics of the deck itself. So the decks were, of course, a white, green, blue Bant Exalted, a blue, white, black Esper Artifice, a blue, black, red Grix Undead, a black, red, green Primordial Jund, and a red, green, white Naya Behemoths. Now, none of the cards in the set mark which expansion, which shard they come from. But since then, information has been released through wizards that tell you which cards belong to which. So it can be looked up online if you want to know what particular cards throughout the set belong to which shard. Now let's talk about some of the cards from this set. There was Ad Nauseam. So you reveal the top card of your library, and you can put it into your hand. Then you put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. Pretty simple, but you can repeat this process any number of times. So as long as you have life to spare, you can continue to reveal the top card of your library, lose life, put it in your hand. Reveal, lose life, put it in your hand. Keep on going. There was Blightning, one that's seen a lot of use and combined with others from this block to make some pretty powerful combos. Blightning does 3 damage to target player, and they discard 2 cards. There was Cruel Ultimatum, one of the more powerful ultimatums. Target opponent sacrifices a creature, discards 3 cards, lose 5 life. You may return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You may draw 3 cards and gain 5 life. So you have your opponent lose a bunch of things, and then you gain a bunch of things. Aethersworn Canonist is a artifact creature that is white that has the ability, when a player plays a non-artifact spell this turn, that player may not play any additional non-artifact spells this turn. Meaning, I can only cast 1 spell a turn that is an artifact as long as it's in play. Shuts down a whole lot of decks, slows them down, shuts down combos very effectively. There's Hellkite Overlord, 8/8 Flying Trample Haste. For 1 red mana, gets +1/+0 until end of turn. For a green and a black, gets regenerated. We talked about this in From the Vault Dragons. It was previewed there, actually printed here. This is where it was meant to be from. But it showed up in the From the Vaults ahead of time. There you go. Knight of the White Orchid. A first strike when it comes into play. If an opponent controls more lands than you may search your library for a Plains card put it in the battlefield, and shuffle your library afterwards. So you play it, opponent has more lands, you get a plains. Ranger of Eos allows you to search your library for up to 2 creatures with a total converted mana cost of 1 or less, and reveal them, put them into your hand. So granted, yes, I'm searching for possibly 2 creatures with a converted mana cost of 1 combined between them, but if one would have a converted mana cost of 0, well, it's easy to search for. And this one, though, was a reward, a prize that someone got for beating one of the Magic tournaments. So this was their card that they designed. Wild Nactil. It's a 1/1. If you control a mountain, it gets +1/+1. If you control plains, you get +1/+1. In Naya-based deck, where you should have all 3, it's a 3/3 for 1 mana. It's very powerful in a way, and it has seen a lot of good play. It's been sort of banned in and out of Modern, though you could still currently use it. So then there's also a Johnny Vengeant. He's a planeswalker that starts with 3 counters on him. For a tick up of 1, target permanent does not untap during its owner's next untap phase. You can keep something tapped. For ticking down 2, he deals 3 damage to target creature or player. You gain 3 life. He basically blasts something, you gain some life. For a tick down of 7, destroy all lands target opponent controls. You nuke 1 opponent's lands for down 7. Boom. Interesting one. Archdemon of Unks, a flying trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice a non-zombie creature, and then put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So it'll keep changing everything you control into zombies until it murders itself. Battlegrace Angel. Of course, it's an Exalted. When a creature you control attacks alone, though, it also gains lifelink until end of turn. So not only does it grant the Exalted bonus, it also gains lifelink when it does the same thing. Blood Cultist. Tap to deal 1 damage to target creature. If a creature dealt damage by Blood Cultist would put it into the graveyard from play this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Blood Cultist. So it has a little bit of that Sengir Vampire effect on a creature that taps to deal damage. 2 creatures. Brilliant Ultimatum. Exile the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates these into 2 piles. You may choose one of these piles and cast every spell in that pile without paying its mana cost. So, your opponent separates 2 piles. I get to choose which of these 2 piles I just play all the cards from, don't have to pay any mana, bam, they're done. And the other 2 are exiled. Broodmate Dragon, a 4/4 flyer that when it comes into battlefield, you put a 4/4 flying red dragon token into the battlefield too. So effectively for casting 1 creature, you get 2. Carrion Thrush. If it's put into the graveyard from play, you may pay 2 colorless and then return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So it dies, I get something else back to my hand. Cradle of Vitality. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1 colorless and 1 white, and then put a +1/+1 counter on target creature for each 1 life you gained. So if you gain 5 life, I pay 1 white, 1 colorless. Target creature gets +5 +1/+1 counters. Crucible of Fire. Dragon creatures you control get +3/+3. You're playing a dragon deck, guess what? They're bigger. Cunning Letharmancy. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player discards a card. I just have everyone discard cards. Death Baron. Skeleton creatures and other zombie creatures you control get +1/+1 and Death Touch. So if you're playing a zombie deck or a skeleton deck, Death Baron is recommended. Gives them all Death Touch. Very mean. Death Greeter. Whenever another creature dies, you may gain 1 life. Simple as that. Other things die, you gain life. Dispeller's Capsule. For 2 colorless, 1 white, tapping and sacrifice it. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Drum Hunter. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature of power 5 or greater, you may draw a card. Tap, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Elspeth. Knight Errant. Comes into play with 4 loyalty counters, this Planeswalker. For tick up 1, put a 1/1 white soldier creature token in the battlefield. For tick up 1, target creature gets +3/+3 and flying until end of turn. And for tick down 8, until end of game, artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and lands you control are indestructible. Makes all your stuff indestructible. Elvish Visionary. When it comes into play, draw a card. It's very simple. It's a staple of any great elf deck because you play it, you get a replacement right away. Replacement card. Elvish Visionary is very good. Imperial Angel. A 5/8 Flying Shroud. All damage that would be dealt to you is dealt to Imperial Angel instead. So I can't target it to make it bigger. I can have other effects that are boosting all my creatures. But effectively, all damage that's dealt to me, as long as it's not more than 8 in a turn, does not kill this thing, does not kill me. Ethereum Sculptor. Your artifact spells cost 1 colorless less to play. Makes your artifact spells cheaper, that's always good. Feral Hydra. The last time we saw Hydra was like unlimited. It's a 0/0 that costs X to play, comes to play with X +1/+1 counters. For 3 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on Feral Hydra. Any player can play this ability. That's an interesting thing. It could combo in that maybe I want my opponent's Feral Hydra, who's attacking my other opponent, to get killed by it, so I might give it bigger. Or I might have something that kills a creature of a certain size, and I want to get it bigger. There are many reasons to make it bigger. Filigree Sages. For 2 colorless and a blue, untap target artifact. Really great for artifact decks. Flamebast Dragon, a 5/5 flying. When it attacks, you may pay X and a red and deal X damage to target creature or player. Effectively, when it attacks, you can fireball. Gather Specimens. Until end of turn, whenever a creature would come into play under an opponent's control, instead, it comes into play under your control. It's an instant, so I could play in response to my opponent trying to put a creature into play or trying to create a bunch of tokens. I get them with Gather Specimens. Godsire. It is an 8/8 Vigilance that has tap. Create an 8/8 red, green, white beast token. So it's an 8/8 that creates more 8/8s. Invincible Hymn. Count the number of cards in your deck. That is now your life total. If you have a really big deck, then yeah, your total becomes really big. If I still have 20 cards in my deck and I've been taking damage, it's still really good. I can gain a whole bunch of life by changing my life total with this. Jund Battle Mage. Black, tap. Target player loses 1 life. Green, tap. Put a 1/1 green sapling creature token in the battlefield. Get saplings or have opponents lose life. Keeper of Progenitus. When a mountain, forest, or plains is tapped for mana, you may produce an additional mana of any type that land could produce. So I'm not saying basic land, I'm saying these things, they have to be of these types, and it doesn't limit if there's some ways that they could tap to add other color mana to your mana pool. Which means if I could somehow tap it for a green as a forest, and have had the ability to tap it for a white, I can now add a green and a white. Kiss of the Erosion. Target player gains 7 life and draws 2 cards. It's just in general pretty good for the mana cost. Knight Captain of Eos. When it comes in the battlefield, you may put 2 1/1 white soldier tokens into the battlefield. For 1 white, sacrifice a soldier. Prevent all combat damage that be dealt this turn. You can make soldiers into the fog spell. Crush the Bloodbraid. When another creature is put into the graveyard from play, you may put X +1/+1 counters on Crush, where X is that creature's power. So the more things die, the bigger and tougher Crush gets. Lich's Mirror. If you would lose the game, shuffle your hand, your graveyard, and all permanents you have in play into your library. Draw a new card of 7 hands, your life total becomes 20. Your game resets. Now your opponent might still be in a place to crush and destroy you, but it might be a chance for you to restart things and put yourself in a better position. Master of Ethereum. It's a star creature where its power and toughness is equal to the number of artifacts you control. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. So not only the more artifacts you have, the bigger it is, it also increases the size of all your other artifact creatures. Muriel the Anima. For 3, a white, a red, and a green, and tapping it. You may look at the top 5 cards of your library, put any creature card from amongst them into the battlefield. Then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So you look at those top 5 cards, you just get a creature. Costs you 6 mana, but any creature just comes out. Memory Erosion. When an opponent plays a spell, they put the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So anytime an opponent plays a spell, they get milled to. Metallurgian. For white and tap, regenerate target artifact. Pretty simple, but still pretty good. Mighty Emergence. When a creature of power 5 or greater enters the battlefield, you may put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So this 5 or greater is 2 power higher, effectively. Mindlock Orb. Players can't search libraries. Stops library searching dead in its tracks. Mycoloth. A 4/4 Devour 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 green sapling creature token to play for every +1/+1 counter on Mycoloth. In a fungus sapling deck, you create a whole bunch of saplings, you sacrifice them all to Mycoloth, and every turn you get double the amount you sacrificed in saplings into play. Necrogenesis. For 2 colorless, remove a creature card from a graveyard from the game, put a 1/1 green sapling token to play. And this from any graveyard. You just take creatures from graveyards to get saplings. Oblivion Ring. When it comes into play, exile target non-land permanent. When Oblivion Ring leaves the battlefield, return that non-land permanent to play under its owner's control. So you can just phase something out, and then it will come back when Oblivion Ring leaves. Ooze Garden. For colorless and a green, sacrifice target non-ooze creature. Put a XX ooze creature token into the battlefield that's green, where X is equal to the sacrifice creature's power. So if you have some way of pumping up power, you could pump up the power in some kind of creature, sacrifice it, and get really big oozes. Prince of Thralls. When a permanent an opponent controls would be put into their graveyard from play, put that permanent into play under your control, unless that opponent plays 3 life. So anything that your opponents lose, you get unless they pay life. Quietus Spike. Equip 3. Equipped creature gets Death Touch. When the equipped creature deals combat damage to an opponent, they lose half their life, rounded up. So you make it that they don't want to block it, but they do want to block it. So it's kind of this horrible, horrible thing with Quietus Spike. They either lose a lot of life, or a creature. Rafik of the Many. It's exalted. When a creature you control would attack alone, it gets double strike. So it gives all your exalted attacking creatures double strike when they attack alone. Of course, until end of turn. Relic of Progenitus. Tap. Target player removes a card from their graveyard from the game. You can they choose what card it is, but they remove it from the game. Or for 1, you could sacrifice the Relic of Progenitus, and every player exiles all cards in their graveyard from the game. You basically exile all graveyards with just sacrificing it. Sarkhan Vol, another Planeswalker, with 4 loyalty counters. For tick up 1, target creature you control gets +1/+1 in haste until end of turn. For tick down 2, gain control of target creature until end of turn, it gains haste. You steal something for a turn. For tick down 6, put 5 4/4 flying red dragon creature tokens onto the battlefield. So you get 5 big old dragons if you have his big tick down. Scourglass. Really great in artifact deck because it's tap. Sacrifice Scourglass. Destroy all permanents that aren't artifacts or lands. So only your artifacts and lands stay out. Scourglass is great against non-artifact decks. Cedrus, the Traitor King. Each creature in your graveyard has Unearth for 2 colorless and a black. You effectively give everything in your graveyard Unearth, and if even it had Unearth cost before, might be cheaper. You just make it makes anything an Unearth deck. Sharding Sphinx. When an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a 1/1 blue flying Thopter creature token into the battlefield. So when your creatures deal damage, you get more of them. Sharmum the Hegemon. Flying. When it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to play. Card. Any card you get back from grave to play. Spearbreaker Behemoth. It has Indestructible. And for 1 mana, target creature with a power of 5 or greater gains Indestructible until end of turn. It's really great if you have a big, stompy beast deck. You can put everything you control with Indestructible with just a little mana. And it's Indestructible too anyway. Very nice. Sphinx Sovereign. It's flying. At the end of a turn, you gain 3 life if Sphinx Sovereign is untapped. Otherwise, each opponent loses 3 life. So either I gain life, or opponents lose life. Stoic Angel. It's a flyer. Players may not untap more than 1 creature each turn. It's great for an Exalted deck, because you're only going to be attacking with 1 creature anyway. Tezzeret the Secret. Another Planeswalker. 4 tokens on it. For tick up 1, untap up to 2 target artifacts you control. For tick down X, you search your library for an artifact with a converted mana cost of X or less, and put it in the battlefield under your control. And for -5, artifacts you control are 5/5 creatures until end of turn. Now, Tezzeret here, I never use that 5/5 thing. It's okay, but most of the time, it's not going to be great for what I'm planning. The search for any artifact, the untapping, that's what's great about him. Tezzeret's other abilities combo well. Tidehollow Strix. It's a flying Death Touch 2/1 for 2 mana. Pretty good. Titanic Ultimatum. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +5/+5, first strike, trample, lifelink. Big, mean creatures, trampling, giving you life, dealing damage first. Vicious Shadows. When a creature is put into the graveyard from play, you may have Vicious Shadows deal damage to target player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So, granted, the creatures just have to die for this effect to activate. There's nothing else based on the creatures, it's based on the cards in the player's hand. So they run out of cards, well, you don't deal damage to them, but Vicious Shadows still. Violent Ultimatum. Destroy 3 target permanents. That's just it. It's a bunch of mana. Granted, it's probably more mana effective than other permanent destructions, but you blow up 3 of anything. Where Ancients Tread. When a creature of power 5 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you may have when Ancients Tread deal 5 damage to target creature or player. The more big things you have, the more damage you deal to anything, especially other players. You can easily kill them off by playing a couple of really big, nasty creatures. Finally, Woolly Faktar. A 5/4 for 3 mana. One of its 3 different colors. Simple as that. Bam, 5/4 for 3 mana. Pretty good. But that's it for today. So I've introduced you to the first of the Alara block, Shards of Alara, which has introduced us to an interesting new concept, the 3 mana blocks. So now whenever you talk about the 3 mana blocks, they're always Bant colors, or Grixis colors, or Jund colors. You can't get away from that. Just as if you talk about 2 colors, it always harkens back to the Ravinica guilds. These names, regardless of the set, stick with them. And this introduced us to some very powerful and interesting mechanics. Some great abilities that comboed well into the future now. And we can see where this will evolve into, and how the storyline will come. But I hope you're having a great day. If you have any cool and interesting Magic the Gathering stories, go ahead and share them with me in the comments below. I love to hear about all of your tabletop stories, especially Magic. But until the next time, I bid you farewell.